I feel like there's something up with my mother lately. She always means well, but something's off. It's just a feeling.
A schoolgirl tries to reassemble the pages of her diary along with the broken life it describes in Journal. That's coming up next on JO42 Reviews. If there's one thing for which the recent deluge of indie games is to be commended, it's for trying to find new angles for interactive storytelling outside the Michael Bay-esque structures of so many AAA titles. When it works, we have stunning pieces of brilliance such as Popo and Yo or That Dragon Cancer. Sadly, other works such as Gone Home and Sunset, much ballyhooed games that have been written off derisively as walking simulators, fail to capture the essence of what it means to be a game and accomplish the remarkable feat of being more boring than playing nothing at all. It is into this sharp dichotomy that one comes to evaluate Journal. Journal follows an unnamed teenage girl who finds that the pages of her diary have suddenly gone blank. It's an interesting premise, but one that is quickly forgotten as the dialogue-heavy title loses the player in reams of small talk between the lead character and her many NPC counterparts. Throughout these elaborate dialogue exchanges, a larger sketch of this young woman and her life begins to emerge. She is vain, shallow, and given to blaming others for her misdeeds. This last point is most important as denial becomes an ongoing theme in the game that eventually brings us to an unexpected and somber conclusion. There is much to love about Journal. The haunting precision of the soundtrack is a perfect complement to the hand-drawn animation that manages to capture both the elegant ambiance of masters like Suzanne Pitt or Pedro Sarazana while still maintaining a juvenile innocence. It's a beautiful world to walk around in for a while, and the pervasive sense of unease becomes increasingly ominous throughout. Such an atmosphere is underscored by cutaway cinematics that tell a surreal side story only later understood in the larger context of the narrative. Journal comes to us courtesy of Richard Perrin and Locked Door Puzzle. When I reviewed Perrin's previous game, Cairo, I commented that it was long on gameplay and short on substance. Journal has the opposite problem. It presents a lush visual world rich with metaphor and an almost obsessive attention to character development, but it's just not engaging to play. You'll spend most of your time cycling through dialogue options and reading copious amounts of text, and if you're like me, start to wonder if this whole thing would have been better realized as an animated short than a game. The problem is not that the game is dialogue driven. Classic adventure gaming is full of that. The problem is that the dialogue isn't particularly interesting. For the most part, it's the kind of whiny teenage drama that most of us were happy to leave behind when we entered adulthood. Rather than create an ongoing narrative that engages our interest, we're instead introduced to a menagerie of angsty teens and emotionally detached adults whose relationships to one another are consistently discussed but seldom, if ever, dramatized. All of the action, it seems, has already occurred, and we're simply left to hear about it secondhand as our heroine learns little by little to come to terms with what a whiny little shit she really is. Add to that the fact that the occasional choices you get to make within the conversations have virtually no impact on the overall story, and you're left with what feels more like a chore than a game. This is my ongoing frustration with the polarizing world that is modern indie gaming. Time and again we're faced with designers who know how to make wonderful art but don't understand how to make an engaging game. Journal is presented as a sort of platforming adventure. There's even a useless jumping mechanic, but that format suggests a level of interactivity that's never realized. Perrin would do well to compare Journal to platforming art house masterpieces like Braid and Limbo, games that combine the poetic sensibilities of Journal with compulsively playable game mechanics. As it stands, Journal presents a look into a deeply emotional world that lacks the engaging gameplay that would have made it a masterpiece. In reviewing Perrin's work, I'm reminded of how harshly film critic Roger Ebert judged the early work of David Lynch, including such classics as Blue Velvet and Wild at Heart. Ebert's frustration with Lynch was that he felt like the filmmaker was not fully realizing certain potent ideas within his films. He and his colleague Gene Siskel agreed, for example, that Lost Highway felt like a notebook full of good ideas that were never fully explored. He was consistently critical of Lynch, but gave him tremendous, unreserved, and enthusiastic thumbs up upon the release of Mulholland Drive, regarded by many to be Lynch's magnum opus. Although I disagree with Ebert's take on on Lynch's earlier work, I feel like I'm in a similar boat with regards to Richard Perrin. He's a skilled designer who has repeatedly shown himself to be technically capable in multiple genres, but his full potential is never realized. I would like to think that his Mulholland Drive is just around the corner, but as it stands for Journal, thumbs down.
If you enjoyed this commentary, please help me continue to bring you more content by making a donation to patreon.com/JordanOwen42. Your contribution will help me turn this channel into a hub of libertarian pop culture discussion and current events commentary. Thank you for listening, and as always, please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already.